This video is sponsored by Opera GX. If you're like me, the browser that you use for the internet is very important to you, and unfortunately I've been stuck with one that rhymes with Rome that is an absolute data hog. I got 64 gigabytes of RAM and that still takes up 12%. But I gotta tell you, Opera GX really does make a big difference, especially when it comes to watching anime. Check it out. First, you grab a sweet animated anime wallpaper, which is pretty sexy. I'm a big fan of the Naruto and Hunter x Hunter ones personally. Secondly, and perhaps most important for me, Opera GX has a video pop-out button that creates a floating adjustable video frame. That's absolutely huge for people who multitask while watching anime, and personally, it's extremely helpful to use while editing so I can have whatever part up that I need while I'm working on it. It's also super simple to use. It makes multitasking a dream. And on top of that, you can also log into Spotify, Apple, or YouTube Music and have them directly on your sidebar, making it easy to have all of your music in one place without bloating up your screen. Plus, if you start watching or streaming something else, your music will automatically pause and then resume once you finish. It's pretty slick. Opera GX makes it incredibly easy to switch to their browser as well. You can import your history, bookmarks, cookies, so it makes setting it up fast without any hassle. There is really no reason not to give Opera GX a shot. It's honestly so much more customizable than any other browser, and I gotta give it the Bonsai Pop stamp of approval. So, use our link below to download Opera GX today, make the channel look good, and enjoy your internet browsing that much more. Thanks to Opera GX for sponsoring this video. Now back to the show. You know, sometimes I remember that it is my actual job to find and show you guys good anime, and I really do my best, I swear. The major issue I have making videos, besides my increasingly deteriorating mental health from being locked inside all day finding good anime, is that there is so much good anime out there. Generally, we pick the cream of the crop.
Not this time.
Is It Wrong to Try to Pick Up Girls in a Dungeon is arguably the worst name for an anime out there. It screams stinky trash harem fantasy isekai. Well, I would like to introduce you to I Can't Believe It's Not Isekai. Is It Wrong to Try to Pick Up Girls in a Dungeon, or IIWTTTPUGIAD, is actually just a fantasy anime. No truck-kun needed. I'm also going to be referring to it by the much better name, Danmachi, and honestly, they should have just stuck with that subtitle. Seriously, the name is so bad. So bad that it might just be from a light novel. Oh, look at that. It is. But you know what isn't bad? Is It Wrong to Pick Up Girls in a Dungeon? I know, I can't believe it either, so I made a video on it. The anime sphere these days is so littered with popcorn garbage that giving something not hyped to oblivion a chance is a rare trait among regular viewers. Lucky for you, I'm not a regular viewer. I have a secret only our patrons and fans of our podcast know. I'm a dirty, disgusting, degenerate trash goblin. What? You thought it was some kind of anime version of a Scorsese nut? Nah, son, let me shatter your illusions. I am my own mother's worst nightmare. I hide in my room, lights out, Snorlax Kidugumi on, body pillow primed, laying in bed full of empty DoorDash bags, and watching absolute garbage till my retinas bleed. It was during one of these sessions of sadness that I came across Is It Wrong to Pick Up Girls in a Dungeon? And I thought to myself, I bet there's some hot anime girls in this, so I watched it. This was back in 2015. I've been doing this for a long time. And you know what? I was right. There was hot anime girls, a bunch of them, and they were all pretty much in love with the main character, a white-haired, red-eyed twink husbando named Belle. Naturally, having no shame, I watched the 6 or so episodes that were out at the time and fell off. I wouldn't return to the series until after season 3 was released many years later. And frankly, at the time, I was surprised that there was 3 seasons. I was even more surprised to find out that season 1 was accompanied by an OVA, season 2 had a feature film, and season 3 would also get an OVA. There would also be a season 4, and as of right now, it just wrapped up. Oh, and there was also a side series that goes over season 1 from a different character's perspective. So considering all the content that has been made out of this series, why is nobody talking about it? Somewhere buried in the annals of the internet is a literal frothing fan base keeping this series alive, but they are so quiet you would be totally validated in thinking that they didn't exist. This right here is not a requested video, but as I binged through all of Donmachi like the dumpster raccoon that I am, I had a startling revelation. Donmachi is good. It's really good. So let's talk about that. So for a typical fantasy RPG style anime, Danmachi stands out in a lot of ways. Now I figured the mature rating on it was for, like generic ecchi garbage. In fact, I was kind of counting on that. However, I was initially disappointed to find out that despite some characters being, how you say, well endowed, the cameraman for this show was taller than the ones for something like, say, Ladies vs. Butlers or Ikitoshi, you know what I mean? Also, Cameraman-kun was apparently a lot more skilled than the ones in your general D-tier anime. If memory serves, there's actually not one shot of solid Pantsuchan in the whole series. But that's not what makes Danmachi good. I mean, that could be a negative depending on what your black heart is looking for. Solid visuals and direction or not, if the characters and story is bad, it's gonna be a bad anime. So instead of being that YouTube analyst guy, let me describe the intro scene. A twink is running for his life in a cave, being chased by a giant minotaur. He finds himself cornered as a thing menaces over him. All of a sudden, slice, out of nowhere, something cuts the minotaur's Achilles tendon, which is like, that's metal as hell, dude. Here I was expecting how not to summon a demon lord, but I'm getting hostile instead. Dope. The Minotaur turns to see what attacked it. Its arm is sliced and we get a view of a potential waifu. Blonde hair, gold eyes, cool armor, fashionable skirt, badass sword. The wounded Minotaur falls onto the twink as the girl cuts into it over and over again. Twink is sprayed with the red life juice as the Minotaur splits in half down the middle, absolutely drenching the kid from head to toe. Potential waifu is nonplussed. Now this is the kind of thing that you would expect from Goblin Slayer rather than something called Is It Wrong to Pick Up Girls in a Dungeon? But this is what it is, and what it is, it's pretty cool, man. One of the big issues with any of these Gennaro Fantanime is that the world building generally sucks, and the characters are usually cardboard cutouts of simple tropes. I mean, the OP guy does OP things and all the girls love him and he fights monsters because it's either a video game or Dungeons and Dragons. And if you give this show a shot like I think that you should, you're gonna learn pretty quick that Donmachi hits different. You're introduced to a world where the gods have descended to be with humanity, and by gods I mean all of them. We got Norse gods, Greek gods, Indian gods, Japanese gods, even Celtic gods, and they're all personified and fleshed out extremely well. So instead of making them these all-powerful deities to be worshipped hand and foot, they instead gave up their divine powers to mingle. They came down here to be entertained by the silly monkeys. So without that divinity, they're essentially normal people with certain skills that they had in the heavens. For instance, Hephaestus is a master smith, Freya is beautiful, Take Mikazuchi is an expert martial artist, and Diane Schecht is a master of healing potions. It's obvious that author Fujino Omori, no image found, did his homework before starting his series. For instance, Loki is a girl in Danmachi, which you think would just be, like a weird perverted, gender swap. But in Norse mythology, Loki can actually just become a woman at will. This is not just anime trash, right? It's anime trash based on trash lore. So most of these gods are self-interested weirdos, but what still makes them special is their ability to impart divine blessings on their followers due to the quote-unquote infinite potential of mortals. Now when a person creates a contract with a deity, they're given a status on their back called Falna, which can be then leveled up as they gain experience performing different tasks. This also adds the contracted individual into the god's familia, hence the subtitle Familia Myth. And from that point onward, only the patron deity can access and upgrade their children's status. That's what the gods call their people, as children. So since the gods are ultimately in control of who does and doesn't enter their personal familia, each familia has its own special flavor due to the idiosyncrasies of its patron deity, which I think is very clever. This also makes each familia kind of like their own clan. So anyway, let's get to Bell. He is the white-haired twink, possible husbando for you. This guy is the first and only member for a while of the Hestia familia, and the goddess Hestia is a deep-cut Greek god despite being extremely prevalent during Greece's heyday. She's like older than Zeus. It's very strange. Hestia is the goddess of the home and the hearth, and if you take time to think about her and Belle's relationship, there's a lot of allusion to her origins. Her number one priority is Belle and making him happy while keeping a roof over their heads. And of course, yes, she's in love with him, but gods are weird and gross, so that makes sense too. But Belle is really interesting in and of himself as a driving force of the plot. His looks are actually narratively purposeful despite being anime as fuck. In the light novels, yes, I'm reading the light novels, he's constantly referred to as the White Rabbit. So therefore, all the girls that find themselves attached to him are following the White Rabbit. And yeah, this shit goes deep, dude. And despite the title, Belle's ultimate goal is not to pick up girls in the dungeon, believe it or not. The title comes from his sussy baka grandpa who filled his head with his personal perversions when Belle was growing up.
Spying on chicks is how a man expresses his feelings.
Grandpa?
It's romance.
Grandpa!
Hence the title, Is It Wrong to Try to Pick Up Girls in a Dungeon? See? Regardless, Belle and Hestia are broken useless. You see, all conscripts of the gods start off at level 1, and the anime doesn't do an amazing job of explaining level differences or what it really means in the larger scope of things, but a level 1 is way stronger than a normal person. This allows them the ability to, say, go into the dungeon and fight weak monsters that would normally disembowel a regular guy in seconds. But that's really it. Being a level 1 is extremely dangerous, and most in the adventurer profession die before making it to level 2. This also means that the first floors of the dungeon are littered with the corpses of failures. Now, level ups come with exponentially more power, but it can take years to get to level 2. This makes the series a lot closer to D&D rather than like an RPG, you know what I mean? Leveling up is very difficult. But to give an example of the difference between 1 and 2, later in the series, a character who was level 1 for their whole lives finally reaches level 2 and can all of a sudden jump from street level to rooftops. The greatest adventurer in this time period is level 7. He's the only level 7, and he can obliterate a level 6 without even thinking about it. I think you get it at this point. Anyway, Belle's dream is to become a hero, and since Hestia is all about Belle, she supports him no matter what, which puts her in a massive amount of debt, but this makes the Hestia Familia a dungeon crawling familia. And like I said earlier, not all familia are concerned with going into the dungeon, but all familia need the dungeon in order to operate. So we should probably talk about the dungeon. Orario is the center of Danmachi's world, both economically and culturally, and I know that kind of sounds boring, but check it out. At the center of Orario is basically a giant hole. A long time ago, this hole spilled forth a legion of monsters that decimated humanity. It was really, really bad until the gods came down, a giant war was fought, and the monsters were pushed back into the hole, which became known as the dungeon. When the gods came to Earth, they built a giant tower on top of it, suspiciously called Babel. And I suppose hole is a weak description of the dungeon. It's more of a descending labyrinth of nightmares. How deep it goes exactly isn't known, or at least it's not specified, but the place is like a whole nother world of its own. Each floor is gigantic and has its own characteristics and ecosystem, from typical caves to ash-covered forests to beautiful underground waterfalls. It's lit by self-illuminating stone and is full of monsters, and these monsters appear spontaneously from the walls, so it's a lot like in a video game when a monster spawns. Sometimes they come out of the walls directly on top of adventurers, which seems like a deliberate trap. The dungeon also self-repairs if structural damage is done to it. This leads many people to believe that the dungeon is actually alive. And considering the way it operates, it does seem to see mortals as like an infection and monsters as its own white blood cells. It's kind of a wild thing. Also note, I've been referring to people as mortals. That's because this is a fantasy anime, so there's cat people and elves and dwarves and shit. All kinks covered. There's even like many humans called prooms, but I digress. Monsters explode into ash when they're defeated, leaving behind a magic stone and occasional drop items. These are what makes the world go round, right? Because items are traded for cash, then they're turned into products. The cash is then spent on products. All of a sudden, there is a full-blown economic structure in a trash anime. And last thing about the dungeon, I would like to mention that there are huge floor bosses that typically require a large party to defeat, and irregularities that occur, which generally wipe an unsuspecting party out. People die in this series. The mature rating is mostly for violence. And I'm gonna skip going into the guild for the sake of brevity, but there's also an entire academic institution based around the exploration of the dungeon and a force used to keep the law within Orario. The guild is wild. When I said the world building was good, I should have said that it was excellent. But Belle is the main focus of the show, so how does a level 1 nobody with no friends except this broke-ass goddess become worth following for the viewer? Well, the waifu candidate I briefly described earlier is named Eyes. She's in the Loki Familia and is a level 5 top tier adventurer when the anime starts. And when Belle is saved by her, he immediately falls in love, but not like ushy squishy love. It's more of a deep admiration and a desire to stand by her side to become stronger so he can catch up to her. There's also no like weird fantasies or anything. Bell is as pure as they come. He makes Tenchi look like a heathen. So meeting eyes unlocks a special skill next time Hestia updates Bell's status, and essentially it's rapid growth, with the caveat that the growth is tied to his feelings for eyes. So the stronger he feels for her, the more rapid his growth. Naturally, he goes from a nobody to an up-and-comer pretty quickly. But I have to make it firm that Bell is not a typical OP protagonist or OP at all. His unique skill gives him an edge in the growth department, but doesn't make him an insta-god. He struggles, he loses, he almost dies constantly. He needs to train, gather experiences, and actually learn how to fight. All of these things are still necessary for him to progress, and he actually earns them. I think this is one of the best choices for the series. It's a lot easier to get attached or root for a character when their victories and growth come at a cost and feel deserved rather than given. But if I'm being real here, and I took my time to make this video because I'm trying to be real, while Bell's quest to be a hero and measure up to eyes is the plot lube, Bell is kind of the show's weakest character. He's certainly the glue that holds everything together, but as a character, he's pretty static. His main characteristic is drive and stubbornness, which, you know, like, I think we've seen that before. But it's the rest of the characters that make Danmachi a great story. Each and every one of them have their own backstories and character arcs, their own motivations and allegiances. Time is spent on them in the anime. Not everything about them is delivered all at once or even spelled out. There's subtlety and complexity to them that makes the series worth watching not just once, but a couple times. Not to mention that Donmachi isn't afraid to go dark, like I said, the violence, but also a huge part of season 2 revolves around a red light district and the intricacies of sex work, and actually handles it with a finesse and even-headedness that I wouldn't expect from an anime, let alone one called Is It Wrong to Try to Pick Up Girls in a Dungeon? And that's really the point, right? With so much anime out there right now, covering an endless amount of topics and genres, it is very difficult to find what you're looking for, let alone something good. Japan is also, and I know saying this is reductive, but I don't know how to say it any better, a weird place. They tend not to market the same way Hollywood or Netflix does in the West. On sites like Crunchyroll, you really gotta take a chance and pick something for the sake of exploration. But that's what I love doing with anime, just exploring what's out there, and whether it's garbage or not, it's always worth the experience. Are you getting the illusions I'm making right now? I feel like I have to spell this stuff out sometimes or people just miss it. Anyway, I highly recommend giving Is It Wrong to Try to Pick Up Girls in a Dungeon the old 3-episode try. And if you like it, or at least you're interested, you got a ton of stuff to watch in between seasons or whatever you're doing right now. All of it is on High Dive, which is definitely my favorite anime streaming platform, OVAs included. And if you're a big Danmachi fan, tell people in the comments why you love it. And I would really like to say that season 4 is by far the best the series has to offer yet. If you're a big Galewind fan early on, stick it out, you're gonna be rewarded. And that's it for me. Thank you so much to Opera GX for sponsoring us. Subscribe if you like this and you want to see more. We got a big Gundam video and a Trigun video coming out. I'm Mike, and I'll see you next time. Bye.